Water is life. Water is vitality. Water is health, and water is so many good things. Till you get too much of it, then it's just the opposite. Water is a scarce resource that people's livelihoods are dependent upon, and especially in a dry year, their yields of their crops can be very dependent upon how much water and when they get that water.
There definitely is a water issue, and really what that stems from, in the state of Idaho actually owns the water, and then you apply for rights in which you can use that. Anytime that you've got a community that's growing, there's some friction associated with, it's a finite source. There's only so much water, and so you have to deal with those types of issues, especially as Idaho grows. When cheap power became available and pumping came in on the aquifer, then we had 50 years of decline. The aquifer really is your underground storage that we have, and so the protection of that aquifer is in everybody's best interest. But as it continues to decline, the levels thereof, it creates a number of problems downstream.
One of the things that you learn pretty quickly is you can't manage what you don't measure. So several people that are using water have had to install measuring devices to be able to accurately keep track of how much water they're being used by different people.
How would you feel about it? Sure, they don't like it, but for some it's required. Some farmers go through and up the nozzle sizes on all their heads, so they're putting out more water per line and think nobody notices, but we do.
So here we're inspecting a well site. So with inventory, I just come up, I've got to get the information from the power meter, I've got to get the information from the pump, an assessment, okay, how many, we've got a farmer here. There you go. Well, he came barreling down this road pretty fast, so I thought, he was like, oh, who's messing with my pump kind of thing. I get nervous sometimes. It's just me, I guess. I don't like confrontation. When somebody's driving towards me, I automatically assume the worst, which isn't necessarily the best thing to do, in my opinion. But it's just like, I don't know if it's human instinct or something. You've got lower prices in commodity. On top of that, you've got taxes. And then to have somebody come in and say, well, you've got to install a flow meter. A lot of them, they feel intruded upon. And I could understand why.
One of the quotes that's common throughout the West, sometimes attributed to Mark Twain, was "Whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting over." And it's probably not 100% true, but there certainly are a lot of disputes when you have a variable supply of water that's needed by so many different people. That is why water and water management has been an important issue in western states, especially the arid states, for a long time.
We do get some things that, in my mind, are kind of disgusting, but we had a man who, he was probably one of the largest, most prominent farmers in this region, one of the widows. But she called me up and said, I can't get my water. And I went over to see her, and I called her son. He knew what was happening. He says, this man up here is shutting off her water. So we met, the widow's son, the three of us, And I explained that you can't shut this off. This is a main valve. And we had an understanding, and then went our way, and it worked fine for about 3 weeks, and they were back to it. And so, I just had to put it in writing. And he took issue with it, thought I was being unkind and out of place, but that's what the law says, is that you have to administer the law without favoritism. And so I did.
Well, in that 1930s, the governor of the state also called out the National Guard into Teton Basin in order to help police the diversion of water so that people weren't taking water that didn't belong to them. And that's a long time ago now. The reservoirs have solved some of those problems, but if you don't have enough water, people can get very intense.
I heard a story about 40 or 50 years ago that a man was taking water, and he was caught by his neighbor, and an argument ensued, and he was whacked in the side of the head with a shovel. And the man, I think, has since changed his ways and is now serving, I'm not sure, but I'm quite sure that it's in the temple presidency. Good man. They're both good guys, you know what I'm saying? But life is such on the farm that you're going to have differences. And, if we know something like that was going on, we'd put up bleachers and charged admission and made a little money on an event like that. So
That's a standard issue. I mean, that's everywhere. And we get phone calls in almost daily about these issues. Somebody might call and say, hey, my neighbor is using too much water. I think my neighbor doesn't have a water right. And it all boils down to trying to get enough water to go around.
Well, you got to have it, every day. Regularly every day. Just like air. If air was only flowing by and someone was taking all your air, you'd get pretty panicky. Same thing with water. Water's your next most important element of life. So, yeah, it's important.
There's an umbrella issue. It's the issue of, do we have enough water to sustain Idaho?
State statutes is critical. The state statutes are good. There's a lot of forethought went into those. I think that's the most critical area, is to administer the law, administer the water according to the law, and do it equitably, and I don't see a problem. We'll see what happens. If we have a year that's as dry as this year has been wet, I'm sure I'll have a better insight then. But so far we've had some good years.